Imagine a pitch-black mountain face in the middle of a winter hurricane. It is 2:30 in the morning on January 19, 2025. On a grainy police webcam pointed at the Grossglockner, Austria's highest and most lethal peak, a single, tiny point of light begins to move. It is descending, slowly, painfully, toward the safety of the valley below. But there is a haunting problem with this image. Only a few hours earlier, there were two lights. 50 meters above that moving light, pinned against the jagged rocks of the summit ridge, another light remains perfectly still. It does not flicker. It does not wave for help. It just sits there, an unmoving star caught in a void of 90 km/h winds and -20-degree temperatures. What the rescue teams would find at dawn was not just a tragic accident. It was a digital trail of betrayal, recorded by a Garmin sports watch, and a sequence of 9 fatal decisions that turned a romantic adventure into a criminal investigation for grossly negligent homicide. This is the case of Kerstin Gurtner. It is a story about the deadly gap between an expert's ego and a partner's trust. It is about a woman who was left to freeze to death while her boyfriend, the very man who led her there, turned his back and walked away. Before we dive into the chilling forensic timeline of that night, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We go deep into the cases where technology uncovers the truth that people try to hide. Now, let's look at how a perfect Instagram couple ended up in a criminal courtroom. Kerstin Gurtner was born on March 6, 1991, in the historic city of Salzburg. To understand Kerstin, you have to understand the mountains she grew up with. In Salzburg, the Alps aren't just scenery, they are a way of life. Kerstin was the embodiment of that spirit, vibrant, active, and deeply connected to the peaks that framed her home. Her social media was a gallery of golden hour summits and pristine ski slopes. She wasn't a reckless amateur, she was a woman who respected the mountains. Kerstin's colleagues at her communications firm described her as determined but cautious. She didn't throw caution to the wind. She understood that the peaks demanded preparation. Her fitness was undeniable. Between 2020 and 2024, she was a regular in the Wings for Life World Run, once ranking in the top 3,000 globally after running 20 kilometers in a single stretch. She had the lungs, she had the legs, and she had the heart for serious adventures. But there was a critical vulnerability that would eventually lead to her death. Despite her love for the peaks and her elite physical conditioning, Kerstin had never undertaken a high-altitude technical winter tour. Her experience was limited to moderate routes and day hikes. She was a passionate enthusiast, but she was not an expert in technical alpinism. Then, at a ski event, she met Thomas Plamberger. Thomas was 36, 3 years her senior, and he was the real deal in the climbing world. He was described as a veteran with extensive experience in high-altitude technical tours. He became her mentor and her guide. Their social media told the story of a well-matched pair, sharing rappelling trips and snowboarding adventures. To the outside world, they were invincible. But what the filters didn't show was the massive experience gap. Thomas had years of technical climbing, Kerstin had years of hiking. On the Grossglockner, that gap would become a death trap. The Grossglockner stands at 3,798 meters. It is the ultimate Austrian objective, requiring technical skill and rock-solid experience. The route Thomas chose for them was the Studel Grat, the southwest ridge. It is graded UIO 3-4. In winter, this is not a hike, it is a battle. You are clinging to frozen rock with thousands of feet of empty air on either side. As the investigation by the Innsbruck Public Prosecutor's Office later revealed, the tragedy began with the equipment. This is where the first critical failures occurred. Thomas, as the experienced partner, planned the entire expedition, making him the responsible guide in legal terms. Yet, he allowed Kerstin to attempt this technical ridge in soft snowboard boots. On frozen rock and ice, those boots have zero grip and zero rigidity. She was carrying a heavy splitboard, which acts like a sail in high winds, further unbalancing her on the exposed ridge. Most fatally, they lacked adequate emergency bivouac equipment, the basic survival shelter that can mean the difference between life and death when a storm hits. Thomas knew the route. He knew the winter conditions. And he knew her gear was fundamentally wrong for a technical grade 4 ridge. Friday, January 18, 2025, started with a mistake that ruined their margin for safety. In winter alpinism, an alpine start at 4 in the morning is standard. You move early to beat the afternoon storms and the setting sun. Thomas and Kerstin didn't leave the car park until 6:45 a.m., 2 hours later than advisable. By 9:30 a.m. they reached the Studhutter. The weather was cold but manageable. But by 1:30 p.m. they reached the Frostplatal, the breakfast spot, at 3,550 meters. This is the critical decision point, the point of no return. The conditions had turned brutal. Wind speeds were hitting 74 kilometers per hour, with a wind chill factor of -20 degrees Celsius. Every textbook and every experienced guide says the same thing: when the wind hits 60, you turn around. This is when judgment must override ego. But they didn't turn around. The defense later claimed they felt fine, but the prosecution argues this was the moment Kerstin's fate was sealed. They pushed into the most technical part of the climb as the sun began to set. By 6 p.m. the mountain was in total darkness. They were now climbing technical rock and ice in a hurricane. At 8:50 p.m. they were done. Kerstin collapsed from severe exhaustion on an exposed snow ramp, just 50 meters below the summit cross. They were stranded with zero visibility. At 10:50 p.m. the Alpine police spotted 2 lights on their webcam and sent the Libel helicopter. The crew flew through dangerous winds and shone a massive searchlight directly onto the couple. This was their miracle. A signal of distress would have triggered an immediate nighttime rescue operation. But no signal was given. Thomas stood there under the spotlight of salvation and did nothing. The helicopter circled and then departed, the pilots believing they were just hardcore climbers who didn't need help. It was a critical, life-saving opportunity lost. At 12:35 a.m. on January 19th, the police finally managed to reach Thomas by phone. We don't know exactly what was said, but the data shows that immediately after hanging up, Thomas put his phone on silent and packed it away. He became unreachable to the very people trying to coordinate a rescue. For hours, as Kerstin's body temperature dropped, the one person who knew her position had cut off the outside world. At 2 a.m., the moment that defines this criminal case arrived. Prosecutors allege that Thomas abandoned Kerstin while she was hypothermic and disoriented. He didn't move her to shelter. He didn't use the emergency blankets they had. He didn't even thaw her heavy backpack to help her breathing. At 2:30 a.m., the webcam caught a single light descending. Thomas was leaving. Kerstin was left alone on a hurricane-swept slope 50 meters from the top. The defense calls this a mutual agreement to seek help. The prosecution calls it abandonment, pure and simple. While Thomas descended to safety, Kerstin's Garmin sports watch continued to record the cold truth. The GPS data shows that she stopped moving entirely at 4 a.m. She remained motionless for the next 6 hours. Medical experts say that at that altitude, without shelter, hypothermia can kill in 30 minutes. Kerstin died alone in the cold while her boyfriend was walking away. Rescuers reached her at 10:10 a.m. the next morning. She was frozen, 50 meters from the summit cross she would never reach. The subsequent 11-month investigation was forensic and exhaustive. They analyzed pixels, GPS coordinates, and heart rates. They identified 9 critical failures on Thomas's part, from the late start and improper gear to the silent phone and the ultimate abandonment. Thomas Plamberger was charged with grossly negligent homicide under Section 81 of the Austrian Criminal Code. This is a severe charge, implying he disregarded elementary safety rules when danger to life was clearly recognizable. The trial is set for February 19, 2026. Expert guides, like Willie and Damon Benez, have offered a pointed analysis. If you have more experience, your job is not to bring your partner up to your level. Your job is to go down to theirs. They believe the real mistake started the day before, when he decided to take an amateur on a technical winter route. Thomas faces up to 3 years in prison. But the real sentence is the data on that Garmin watch, the silent record of a woman's final, lonely hours of life. What do you think? Was this a tragic accident where panic took over? Or was it a cold, calculated betrayal of trust? Let us know in the comments. If you want to follow the trial as we head to the verdict in February, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The mountains only respect those who know when to turn back. Watch your back out there, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.